this moment, and there were lots of them, those of you that were with us, just the aspect of this calf being so close to this female, and I said female there specifically because this must be its mother, but I was thinking about this cow again and looking at pictures I've had of her over the last year, and I've sometimes thought if she wasn't just a surrogate even to this calf. But the closeness here was phenomenal. And if you look at the two different views here, very similar, but in this specific case, just the composition, more importantly, the cropping of it. In other words, do you go a wide, a mid, or a close, if you put it into video terms? In other words, do you get the whole wider picture of it with all the surroundings, or do you really focus in on the closeness there? In this case, the shape of the trunk, or trunks, shall I say, and even the tusk playing a big role in that. I'm going to give you another example of those two. If you look at the slightly wider image of the calf being very close to mum, learning what to eat, that was part of the lessons there, looking at the new acacia leaves that she was eating and mimicking, but there was certainly also a closeness aspect, an emotional aspect to how these two were interacting. And to be honest with you, I can't say which of the two worked better for me. I was still thinking about it, and this is where I'm sure you might have your own opinion. Just the differences between the sort of close and personal crops or the slightly wider ones. I've been looking at some of those, and we're going to go on just now because I'm sure many of you have got maybe a little bit of a lump in your throat now if you're very much part of this emotional story of this. And obviously or a huge part of yesterday afternoon's photographic opportunity for me was to try and capture some of those moments, to try and capture some of that sensitivity, some of that closeness between this elephant cow and the calf. And certainly is something that I'm sure many of you relive now. I was surprised yesterday personally how emotional that whole experience was for me. And then of course from a pure experience point of view, it escalated dramatically. We suddenly had more excitement and drama and beauty arrive through, partly expected. We knew there was some leopard in the area, but the next thing, while we were looking at this incredible scene around us, not only with the calf and the adult elephant, but also with them coming closer to us, we had the alarm call and the sort of warning and drama of the bush come alive around us when we suddenly heard all the impalas. We had expected leopard, and a few minutes later they arrived, and it changed the trend of the experience. But also obviously from a photographic point of view, if you're sitting there, if you were on safari and you've got this incredible scene in front of you with a mother and a calf elephant, and suddenly now you've got leopard arriving and you've got a waterhole and you've got all these different aspects, there's a lot of decisions to make or to be made from a photographic point of view. Now again, the technical aspect of it we will still talk about down the line. Sometimes I still make mistakes from a technical point of view. Sometimes those mistakes work out nicely and I learn something from it. But you also have to decide, how am I going to capture this? Because you've got this whole experience around you with elephants, and we had an amazing sunset behind us as well, as you could see, and leopards arriving. And quite often what happens is two things maybe with photographic experiences, especially for you maybe coming on safari, is that there's so much happening that you might miss out on the physical experience of being there, standing around, looking around and smelling the air and smelling the roses, so to speak, and looking at the sky. That's the one thing, so it's important to look around as well. The other one is that because there's multiple things going on, sometimes people get almost up in which of those to focus on and how to photograph them. Yesterday's was actually quite close to that for me. I found myself at one stage wishing I had 2 or 3 different cameras and a number of hands and a number of eyes so that I could photograph many different aspects, both from a lens point of view or a view point of view, as well as from the animal activity. So maybe I'll touch on that a little bit. Of course, the excitement was great. It's never a bad thing to be sitting in such an amazing place and then suddenly having leopard arriving there. So in terms of the event, the arrival of the leopard to the water was quite exciting for me. Also nice to see that cub there to the right having a look at the elephant. And then of course this is one of the opportunities I think all people hope for. When you come on safari, there is something about seeing animals come to the waterhole. We all experience it daily. We sit and watch the waterhole during the night, during the day. We see many different animals, many different species coming down. And an opportunity to photograph animals in water is always a great one. Now, if you think back to that timeline, I took a whole bunch of images. One of the things that's nice to get, especially with the cats, is to try and capture that tongue as it picks the water up. It just gives this sort of movement of the experience, or I'm not saying it properly, but it gives you the almost like the verb in a sentence if you want. It really shows you what those animals are doing. So get lots of images. If you ever photograph something around the water, take lots and lots of images, because one of them will be better than the other one, even though they might all look quite the same. The other thing to play around with when you have that opportunity is just with different compositions. If you look at the image compared to this one, pretty much the same time. This was taken a few seconds apart. In fact, I did a little bit of different cropping on the two, just to show you how different the impact of that image can be, the moment you've captured and hopefully the feeling you've captured in it, just by where your objects are. So it basically touches on composition. I'm not going to go into the composition of this, but just look at the difference in the experience when you look at that image and how you might perceive it. Now, as I was saying, one of the things that might have been tricky, especially in a situation as incredible as yesterday, is trying to capture either too many different parts of it, or all of it, or some of it, and in a way maybe in the end losing a lot of it. So I took a couple of wide ones yesterday, and as a comparison here to the closer ones, it gives an idea of, from a memory point of view, certainly that's great. There's lots of different parts of this picture that makes it interesting, but in the end maybe yesterday was better, and as I opted to do in that case, to sort of focus in on the two different events. And then of course something amazing happened, and this is maybe where Lady Luck really came along and joined us yesterday. It made it into an awesome experience where, from a visual point of view, these two situations sort of merged. We couldn't have predicted that. We could certainly have hoped for it, but suddenly we found that from where we were sitting and from the, as I said, the visual aspect of it, things were getting closer and closer together. The two stories, if you want, in other words, the elephant that we spent time with earlier, the leopards that came and joined, had an opportunity to merge. So every single time that I've had a talk live, not in the vehicle, I've had this moment where suddenly I think about too many things and not know what to say next. And maybe you can compare it to this situation. Suddenly you've got leopards and an elephant moving closer together through a little bit of animal behavior experience. You can see what's going to happen, and from a photographic point of view, you've now, with this opportunity where you've got different things happening all in the same frame. In other words, you've got the opportunity to capture a moment, to tell a story in an image, and it might be only a short window of time when that happens, and it faces you or gives you a whole bunch of choices. And if I didn't explain that properly in words, let me try and explain it to you in the images. So as this was happening, we could see, and we could certainly hope, that the elephant and the leopard were going to get closer to each other. It got even better actually later on when the elephant walked closer to us as well. But suddenly I had the opportunity to capture an image like this, which I must admit, when I took this and when I looked at it afterwards, it was something that I thought, I'm so excited to have been able to have had this opportunity, and hopefully to have done it reasonable justice in capturing the moment. But what I mean with choices, especially when they're quite quick, in this case there was a few seconds, she sat there for a couple of seconds while waiting for the other cub. There's, in the same moment, different opportunities to capture a slightly different feeling to that experience. Or if you want, that window I just spoke of, where suddenly you've got different things happening in the same visual window, you can make some choices, even as simple as where you focus. I'll just give you that comparison again. The feeling of it, the story of it, can change quite dramatically just by the slight difference of where you decide to put your focus on. I'm personally yet to decide which of those two